Namaste, everybody, and welcome once again. We are joined by Achala Sylwia Mihajlović again. Achala ji, very, very welcome once again. And we have been.
Thank you, Dr. Paili. Namaste.
And we have been getting such wonderful reviews from the series that she started with, healing with the grahas, navagrahas. So she's come back with another navagraha, which is Rahu. So Achalaji, over to you, and please enlighten us with about everything about Rahu and how we can heal ourselves, the Rahu in our charts.
Thank you so much, Dr. Paiji. I'm always so grateful to exchange thoughts and ideas with you. And I thought that is such an actually amazing period to tackle into Rahu, even though we are not really doing this series as I was discussing with you really in order, but I felt it's just really like time-sensitive period because we are right now in an eclipse season, and the lunar nodes, of course, play a vital role in that. So I thought let's talk a little bit about Rahu, because I think that Rahu, like all these tamasic grahas, Rahu, Ketu, Saturn, we are either a little bit confused about them, or sometimes they almost feel frightening or awaken some sort of fear within us, which is also very understandable because the tamagrahas that are embodying the tamoguna, of course, they also reveal our inner shadows, the things that we normally don't want to look into. And Rahu in particular, I think he is great in that. He is really like a great planet in terms of showing us exactly, like right in our face, the things that we don't want to look at. And for me, it's always very fascinating whenever a person is experiencing a transit of Rahu through the moon, usually through the moon, sometimes through ascendant, we can feel it to a certain extent as well, but a transit of Rahu through natal moon, it's such a fascinating thing for me personally to observe how other people react to it, how I react to it, because Rahu, he literally tends to, like if we have like this tiny little small negative quality within us, if it's like very small, like maybe we're a little greedy sometimes or a little short-tempered in some situations or something like that, we usually like tend to, how to say, ignore it a little bit, right? Because it's such a small quality, because everybody has it. So why would we actually improve it? Why would we actually work on it? But the thing is that when Rahu starts to transit for a significant placement, and it usually happens when he transits over our natal moon, he suddenly exaggerates those things. He makes those things look huge and big and massive. And suddenly we feel like, wow, it's so overwhelming to feel that, am I really like that? Do I really have those negative qualities in me? And the thing is that, the best thing that I usually advise to people in moments like that, like, first of all, don't identify yourself with that. It's just a shadow quality. And most likely, Rahu wants to exaggerate it for you now because you are simply not paying attention when it was small. When the problem was very small, very tiny, bothering you just a little bit, but not enough for you to actually change, you would not do anything about it. But Rahu exaggerates that so we can address the problem and actually eventually evolve. So it's not like he is negative graha, in any form. And I would personally say that we can say about any graha that it's negative. We can say about any planet that, in fact. Because even if we look at Tamo grahas, of course, we have sattvic planets, rajasic and tamasic. But also each of these three gunas is ultimately presided by one aspect of Divine Mother or by one of the Trimurti, Brahma, Vishnu, or Shiva. And how can we say about them that they are negative, right? They just perform their duty. The thing is that, of course, somewhere on deep internal level, we maybe do not like that much the actions of Shiva because he is the god of transformation, of destruction. He removes from us all those things that we hang on to so desperately. Which is why, of course, when we are experiencing a transit of tamasic graha going through our natal moon especially, it will feel intense because suddenly those things we were so attached to, we actually need to let go of them. We have the opportunity to grow. And only the attachment to them actually makes the situation worse, not the very action of the graha itself. So the beginning of this presentation I called inner rebel, because that's what I feel, what Rahu truly is. He's like this force within us that always wants to go against the current, do something different in a very different way, out of the box. And essentially, it's not a bad quality, actually, right? Because Rahu, in this sense, he can amplify our creativity. Rahu, in this sense, can help us to actually progress. Because doing something, in a way, when we do something like every day the same, like copy paste, there's no progress happening. But the moment we start to do something a little bit differently, some form of progress or evolution can come into our life. And Rahu actually can help us with that, which is why Rahu is a fascinating graha from this particular perspective. Rahu, of course, is also a very interesting planet, spiritually speaking, because Rahu and Ketu are known to be the devotees or the servants of the goddess, who is Mahamaya herself, who represents the great illusion, who actually binds us in this material world, this matrix, as we would say. But at the same time, they can help us to liberate ourselves from it as well. This is why sometimes we call Rahu and Ketu to be these karmic nodes, because they are shadow planets. Therefore, they don't have actual body. They are the invisible forces. They are not tangible in any way. And through that, they also represent the invisible influences upon our life. And what is the invisible influence on the life itself is the things that extends beyond the current lifetime. Because in our current lifetime, right here, right now, usually we can quite clearly see cause and effect, why things are happening. Even if, of course, we are still driven by all some samskaras, but like really in 90% of situations, if planet is somehow weakly placed in a birth chart, and person experiences the result of that right now in current lifetime, yet still in like this 90% of cases, you will see a cause of that, why a person experiences that in this very life itself. It's possible to find something wrong about mindset, beliefs. It's possible to attribute it to something and kind of work on that. The nodes definitely are a little bit more tricky when it comes to that, because they denote these invisible forces against which we can't grasp them, we can't see them, we can't really control them, and we often don't know much about them. Pretty much like our subconscious, right? Or even unconscious tendencies. They are there, but we have very little control of them. Of course, we can gain certain control over them as well, as we'll talk a little bit later about, but still they are somehow mysterious forces. Of course, Rahu also, along with Ketu, they are not just shadow planets, not just tamasic grahas embodying this guna, but what is quite significant about them, like why we would even consider them, right, in the sky, if we think about it in this sense, because it is a very interesting thing, and it's quite a specific thing also to Vedic astrology, I believe, that we have 9 grahas, navagrahas, 7 planets are visible, but 2 of them are not. They are somehow always at the backstage. And of course, in practice, Rahu and Ketu, they're just eclipse points. But in reality, why would we give identity to eclipse point? Of course, it first of all shows us how important eclipses were, astrologically speaking, like why they are important, in fact. And in fact, these eclipse points, which are mainly determined by Rahu and Ketu, they were considered so important that if there is any planet transiting through any of them, there will be some grand effect happening. So of course, the ancient seers, they noticed that as well. And this, I think, really greatly shows the greatness, actually, of our rishis and of the sages who have given this knowledge, because it really proves that they were aware, not just of these grahas that we see on the sky, they were aware also of those forces which can't be visible, really, which we can't grasp. And that is something great to think about, because I know that sometimes how to say, people, especially who maybe come more from Western astrology backgrounds, then they come to Vedic astrology, then they are surprised that usually we don't use that much Neptune, Uranus, and Pluto in our charts. And then probably our Western logical mind is thinking, okay, these Vedic sages, they just didn't saw these planets because they're so far, right? But actually they saw so many other things that are not visible. They perceive them and they consider them very, very important. So in practice, Rahu and Ketu, they are called Chaya Grahas or shadow planets because they don't have body. They do not have light. They are literally just ascending and descending node of the moon. And they are the ones that are forming the eclipse points. An eclipse here is something really interesting to think about, because why eclipse happens in the first place? Eclipses are happening whenever there is new moon or full moon around Rahu or Ketu, then we'll have respectively solar or lunar eclipse. But I think that a very important point to mention here is why it actually makes so much sense, why it's so important, this eclipse time itself, because of spiritual significance, actually. When sun, moon, and earth align in one line, this is actually when eclipse happens. And that is significant because sun and moon are two luminaries, the givers of light in our sky. They also are said to reside in our Ajna chakra, the seat of our consciousness. So when they align together with our earth, it's almost, like this, our third eye chakra kind of aligns with the root chakra, which is also confirmed in some yogic scriptures that this is what actually happens during eclipse, that we can go so much deeper into meditation. Which is why Rahu and Ketu, regardless of, I would say, tons of bad reputation that they tend to receive, they actually very often do push us also on spiritual path as well, in their own strange ways, but they are trying to realign us. It's not that they just bring some invisible karma from our past lifetimes in order to torment us. They are actually trying to make us progress spiritually. There is some purpose behind that. They want us also to finally reach this perfect alignment within ourselves, between what is, let's say, luminous and bright within us and what is just human within us, right? So I thought it would be very interesting, especially with Rahu, to look once again in the same way how we looked through the Venus, Moon, and Mars before in previous sessions, to see how Rahu will behave differently when he gets in touch with three different gunas, tamas, rajas, and sattva. And of course, I understand it might be confusing because we just say that Rahu is essentially a tamasic planet. But of course, he can manifest through different modes, same like any other graha. He can either be much more tamasic, like tamasic tamas, right? A little bit more rajasic in nature, or a little bit more sattvic in nature. And it all very often pretty much depends on us, actually, how we approach this energy and how we work with it. Rahu is definitely not easy to work with, but I believe that once anyone actually recognizes the symptoms of Rahu, it becomes easier to work with him also and to not kind of feel overwhelmed by his energy, especially during transit or eclipse times. So what is happening when Rahu is, let's say, more tamasic? This is, by the way, something that would most likely happen when Rahu is maybe in conjunction with a tamasic graha or transiting the tamasic rashi, etc. This is when more of his tamasic mode is visible. Of course, tama guna is the guna of ignorance, and when Rahu himself becomes a little bit more tamasic in nature, this is also what will manifest. Usually, like the first thing that we can notice about Rahu when his tamoguna, let's say, increases due to some specific combination, transit, or mahadasha, is confusion. That's actually the first thing we experience. We feel just confused, like you don't know anymore what's wrong, what's right. And even sometimes those things that we thought that they're like unshakable truths, like this is what we believe in, he actually challenges that and makes us question that. And it's not a bad thing, essentially. It makes us think about life, things what is really important in life. But sometimes he can really take us like so deep into the speed of delusion and confusion. And this is like one thing that in my personal astrology practice, I have experienced that people struggle the most with, because he does not only create confusion and a sense of, let's say, delusion or moral dilemmas and things like that. Thing is that it also creates this, at the same time, this sense of urgency inside of us, that I have this confusion, I have this dilemma, and I must resolve it right now. That's actually one other trait that we can experience when Rahu has huge influence upon us. We will be both confused and impatient, and it's a very intense combination, right? Because it's a very bad combination. When you don't know what to do not rush into doing it. That's the first thing. Rather, give it time. Actually see how situation kind of evolves on its own. So of course, Rahu from this perspective really can make us suffer sometime if we listen to this mind inside of us. Because what is actually Rahu? Rahu is this head without the body, right? The overthinking, the over-worrying mind which is full of fears and doubts, and suddenly doesn't know anymore what is wrong, what is right, and doesn't know where to go. And the mind actually feels so stressed when it's in a situation that it cannot, know anymore what's wrong, what's right, that it wants to resolve it as soon as possible. And it's a very natural, I would say, almost biological reaction. But one thing that can be very, I would say, helpful in a situation like that is to understand and remind our mind in a moment like that, when Rahu has influence upon us, that it's limited, actually. That's one truth that we all do not like to look at. The fact that our own mind, our own sense of judgment actually might be limited. This is something that I really kind of reiterated a lot on my recent workshops, but it's so true if you think about it, how crazy it is actually from our side that we always think that our mind is right. In fact, it's actually crazy to think about, right? It's like literally a definition of delusion, but yet we do that. It's like kind of normal and natural for all of us. So suddenly when we are forced to question that and we cannot depend on this mind anymore as usual, it feels very humbling, to say the least, because we need to openly admit that we don't know. And that is something that mind does not like to admit, that we do not know something. We really do not know the way forward. And that it's also okay to not know, that it's okay to not necessarily know the answer now, maybe not even in a week, but just give it time and see how situation evolves. This is one other thing that I personally like to advise a lot to people who go through these Rahu sensitive periods, like Rahu Mahadasha, or maybe Moon Mahadasha, Rahu Antardasha, or Rahu's transit through Moon, is that Rahu, like one of his biggest, I would say, trademarks is, first of all, is the sense of confusion. And the other trademark is the sense of urgency, that we need to do it right now, that we can't function if we don't do it right now, that we can't even live our life anymore if we don't resolve this problem right now. But actually, the best thing to do in most cases when Rahu is impacting us in that way is to just take a step back, understand that we don't necessarily need to listen to this sense of urgency that comes from the mind, and ideally postpone taking decision. In fact, postpone it for a week at least, or for 2 weeks. This is, honestly speaking, one of the biggest advices I usually give to people when they are like heavily impacted by Rahu. Just postpone your decision making. That's all, as much as possible, because the moment Rahu goes over your moon already and will start moving away, you will see the world differently again. So actually postponing making decisions is a very good idea in periods like that, in order to not get into some tricky situation ourselves. Now, another thing that we can notice when Rahu is in this more tamasic mode is that even in mythology associated with Rahu, right? Samudra Manthan, the great churning of the ocean. Rahu felt treated very unfairly, right? At some point, he was like, why the gods get it and why do we demons don't get it? And feeling that we are treated unfairly, either by life, by karma, even by God himself, in fact, is also another very common trait when Rahu is in this state. Rahu goes a little bit in a victim mode and can put us there as well, and can make us believe that whatever we receive in life, it's unfair, or that our treatment by life is unproportionate to what we have done. But again, if we take a step back and remind ourselves that, okay, maybe it's true, maybe I'm trying to be a good person my whole life, and then I face some grave misfortunes, but how do I know who I was in a previous lifetime, actually, right? How do I know, like, how my life was, what I was doing? This is one thing that Rahu forgotten about in the story of Samudra Manthan, right? He was like, gods are getting Amrit, we demons don't get nothing. But who were the gods in previous lifetimes, and who were the demons in previous lifetimes? So this is another thing that can be very helpful when Rahu is making us go crazy a little bit, because in a period like that, it's really important to remind ourselves of a bigger picture, that we are a little bit more than just this little identity, this little life, and all our petty dramas that we experience. We are actually the soul, the grand continuum of consciousness that experienced so many things in past lifetimes already. And we are barely bearing the results right now. So definitely Rahu also can sometimes put us into this type of state as well. Of course, when Rahu's energy gets like completely out of control, like gets full tamasic, it can like cause complete chaos. In lightest case scenario, a person, for example, with a little stronger Rahu in a birth chart will be just messy, right? In terms of like cleaning apartment, etc. There will be just creative chaos all around. But when Rahu goes full tamasic, he also can create mess in many other areas of life, not just our home. He can create lots of like this sudden confusion and this sudden inner churning of the ocean, literally. Because it is true, like when we are in the process of this ocean being churned of our consciousness, we don't see the outcome. We focus only on what we experience right now. And this is, again, where Rahu can thrive and can make us believe that this drama, this transformation, it will last forever, right? But if we take a step back again and remind ourselves that there is a purpose why we experience that, and maybe we will actually emerge being better persons, maybe we'll have better life afterwards. And this is also a very important, I would say, thing to take into consideration when we are thinking of Rahu. Rahu, when he's tamasic, unfortunately, he can take us also more towards the side of addictions. And my personal belief is that the reason why Rahu can induce addictions, because it's kind of strange, right? Rahu is normally thinking out of the box. He's not into establishing habits, and addiction technically is a habit. But my personal feeling is that why Rahu can sometimes cause addictions is simply because of all these things above. Because if we think about it, if a person feels confused about what to do, person experiences something very difficult in life at the moment and literally doesn't know how to deal with it, because this is some just pastime life result that comes into person's life, it's not so strange that person may just try to run away from reality, literally. And that's also what Rahu does when he's, let's say, at his worst, I would say. He makes us run away from reality, actually. That's why Rahu and Ketu are both also associated with some form of mental disorders and things like that, because Rahu is the head, and he can make us overly just stuck in the head as well, and in this mental chatter that is constantly there. Now, when Rahu evolves a little bit, he can evolve into the rajasic mode, and when Rahu becomes rajasic, he is truly embodying more of the energy of, constant like longing, greed, and hunger and consumption, because he represents the mouth, right? So he wants to eat constantly. And if you think about it, like head without a body, so he can eat and eat and eat, but he never feels the consequences of that, actually, because it's like it's just going through. He never feels the consequence. He never feels satiated either. So there's this constant need to explore more, to feel more, experience more. When Rahu is a little bit more in this rajasic mode, he can go into more his, I would say, common qualities, like he can be manipulative, absolutely, to get what he wants. He can use deception to get what he wants, and Rahu is very good in that, in fact. Of course, he can make us go also more to this material side of longing, like consumptionism, constant hunger, but not just for food, but for all experiences, depending which sign he is in, with which graha he is, etc. Constant sense of urgency, that's another thing that Rahu is inducing in us. We actually become impatient with Rahu, because when Rahu wants something, like resolve a problem or to get something, he wants it right now. And it feels almost unbearable to reject that, to basically speaking, put this desire away. Which is why, once again, whenever we are dealing with Rahu's energy, usually postponing things helps a lot. For example, if Rahu induces us to do something that we somehow deep inside know that we shouldn't do, but it's still very hard to make this decision because Rahu literally makes us in a different state of mind sometimes. He just intoxicates us with his energy. Then what we can do is just to keep postponing. For example, don't make this decision today, at least do it tomorrow. That's a small step for the mind, but it can help. Then tomorrow, again, postpone it once again. If you can, just try to postpone this, let's say, giving Rahu exactly what he wants, because even if he gets what he wants, he will most likely not get satiated or satisfied. He will keep searching for more. Rahu also, of course, tends to exaggerate situations, things, feelings as well, especially feelings. The pain can actually feel more real when we are going through any period associated with Rahu or transit connected to Rahu. Many things kind of become very exaggerated. But again, it's not a bad thing in a way. Like for me personally, I actually appreciate Rahu for the fact that he tends to exaggerate those spheres of our life related to planets he transits through or houses in our birth charts he transits through, because he makes us truly face those things and fix some problems there as well. But sometimes he can make us also overly fixated on those spheres of life, and this is when it becomes problematic. Rahu generally, when, of course, he's more in his rajasic mode, he will be kind of trying to always, like, how to say, I personally noticed that when Rahu is always like more in the rajasic mode, he will have a very, very strong dislike to any kind of authorities, including teachers, because Rahu is the mind, and mind does not like the idea that somebody can be better than it, basically speaking. Mind wants to be the master, the ultimate authority, which is why people strongly dominated by Rahu, they might have like this natural dislike towards authorities, teachers, especially spiritual teachers, any form of scripture, any form of regulatory, how to say, thing for the ego. Because, of course, the biggest problem with the ego is that, how to say, it's almost impossible to overcome it on our own, because the moment we try to overcome it on our own, we already give it the authority. So the moment it needs to face some external authority in a form of teacher, in a form of guru, in a form of scripture, and kind of face its own delusions, ego, of course, doesn't like it at all. It doesn't feel at all compelling. It actually feels very, very, very disturbing inside. So, of course, it's a very interesting trait also for Rahu. Rahu can also, I would say, manifest almost any type of ego's defense mechanism when he feels threatened in any form, like generalization, for example. If, for example, I have bad experience with one spiritual teacher or astrology teacher, it means all of them are bad. That's a very common thing for Rahu to do as well. It's like big generalization or projection of our own negativities onto another person as well. So especially when we are going through Rahu sensitive periods, we need to kind of have, I would say, a very healthy level of distrust towards our own mind, simply speaking, because he can decept us, and the mind is amazing in that as well, especially if we don't do any form of, how to say, regular introspection. Rahu, of course, in more rajasic modes, he'll be very much into breaking the rules, which is not so bad, like if there is some higher purpose behind it, right? Sometimes we break the rules because there is some higher goal behind it. Maybe there's some higher dharma behind it, or something good can come out of it. But sometimes Rahu, when he's in these rajasic modes, he might have a little bit of tendency to just break the rules for the sake of breaking the rules, literally. Like, let's see what happens, basically speaking, like this sheer curiosity. So Rahu, when he's rajasic, you can see those type of traits, those type of qualities a lot on people who are, how to say, just in the beginning of their spiritual path, or just the beginning of learning astrology, right? We want to learn all the courses, all the knowledge, but there's no order in that, right? We are just learning a little bit from YouTube videos. That's how most people start, I believe, in our times. A little here, little there, just keep feeding our mind, but we are not really selective about the content we feed our mind with. And normally selectiveness, I would say, is almost like an antithesis of Rahu. Rahu is not selective at all when he's in his like this hunger mode and urgency mode, which is why becoming more selective about the foods we eat, the vibrations we surround ourselves with, even the type of knowledge that we absorb and receive can be very helpful in that. For me, it was very powerful how my Gurudev actually said once that whenever, especially we learn something new, we need to pay huge attention to that, whether the knowledge that we receive is actually liberating us and supporting us on that path, or is it binding us and creating even more doubts and confusion? Because the true knowledge should dispel confusion, not create it, in fact. So that's also a very interesting thing to consider with Rahu. But of course, Rahu has this beautiful side as well, and we just cannot overlook it. Because when Rahu also becomes more sattvic in nature, he actually can cause a lot of progress in our lives as well. And this is in any sphere of life, in fact. Because just the fact that Rahu makes us question things, makes us a little confused about things, is not a problem, in fact, if we know how to meet this energy in a healthy way and hold it. And if we are not afraid to just ask those questions to ourselves. And if we are also not, I would say, afraid to admit in front of ourselves that maybe we really don't know. And maybe we really have some weaknesses that we need to address. Because when we approach Rahu from this perspective, then actually all these experiences that we have been talking about, that he's giving us, they can become a cause for growth as well and evolution. They can become the cause of out-of-the-box thinking, innovation as well, right? Creating something new. And the interesting thing is that actually, even if you read like the description of Sage Parashara of Rahu Antardashas, for example, he very often mentions that people who go into Rahu Antardasha in various Mahadashas, they begin to practice yoga. They develop spiritual interest. Because as much as Rahu causes this sometimes consumptionism, hunger, and longing, but how long can you just satisfy your mind with material things? It has a limit. It's a pleasure that begins, but also finishes. And then Rahu actually comes into play almost as a spiritual savior, and he tells us, hey, there is more. Let's aim for more, actually. Let's connect to the source rather than just succumb, to what is lower. So interestingly, Rahu really can help us as well on spiritual path. And sometimes the very reason why he creates and takes us, I would say, through this whole journey from tamas through rajas to finally sattva, from ignorance and then through greed to progress, is because he actually wants us to finally extinguish all those desires and realize that there's no point, actually, in the end. That no matter how much we eat, no matter how much we consume, there is a limit. This reminds me actually of a story of a saint that my Guruji has shared some time ago. It's quite intense story, but it really, in my feeling, so beautifully illustrates the energy of Rahu. So the story was that there was one saint, one sadhu, living humbly in his hut and in a very humble conditions, focused on the divine, focused on God, doing his mantra, his japam every day with full focus. And then one day through the forest when he was leaving, there was one merchant, one seller passing by, and he was actually selling jalebi, the Indian sweet. So the saint, in that moment, he just thought of his jalebi. He said, "No, I will not take it." So he continued his meditation. But this night, when he tried to do his mantra, his japa, focus on Krishna, he could just see jalebi and nothing else in his mind. So of course he was really disturbed. Then the next days were very similar. The only thing he could think of was this jalebi and nothing else. So he finally said to himself, "Okay, I will put an end to this." So he went to the market, and he actually bought from this merchant all jalebi he had, all of that, completely. So what this saint did, he was actually very clever, but in terms of how he understood how his mind works. So he sat in his hut with all this massive pile of jalebi sweets. For those of you who don't know what is jalebi, it's really, really sweet. It has like lots of sugar. So he started to eat those jalebis very quickly, without limit. He actually ate so much jalebi that he vomited all of that. And then he said to his own mind, "Is this what you want, really?" And he was healed of that instantly. So I think to myself that sometimes what Rahu, why he makes us go through this rajasic phase of this like almost compulsive, longing and hunger for different things and experiences, is because he wants us to finally face it and to see and to really tell us in the same way, like, is that what you really want? Because maybe there's something higher. Maybe it's not as great and glorious as you think in your mind it is. And that's something definitely to think about whenever we think about Rahu. So one thing that is, of course, very interesting when we talk about Rahu is that he's causing this sense of urgency within us, sense of struggle, sense of stress. So obviously, it makes us think that meditating in periods when we are dominated by Rahu can help us a lot. Only sometimes the problem is that when we try to meditate in periods when we are dominated by Rahu, he will still keep bringing the very same issues to our mind. It might be very hard, actually, to do just any form of mental activity in order to overcome. Same like in this story with a saint, right? He's trying to do his japam, his mantra, he sees only jalebi. It's the same with us. So actually, this is why very often it was more recommended in the past that when we are in periods dominated by Rahu or Rahu's transit, it's easier to do something physical, in fact, like Hatha Yoga, something which forces our awareness out of our mind and focuses it on something else. This usually can be far more helpful than just sitting in meditation, especially if we are not experienced with that, if we don't have any technique, etc. Just to bring our awareness outside, out of our head for a moment. Also, Rahu is quite interesting because actually all Navagrahas from Sun to Saturn, they are connected to one of the chakras in our energy body, as Sri Yukteswar was teaching. But with the nodes, it's a little bit different because nodes are, in the first place, Rahu and Ketu, they don't even have physical existence. They are just eclipse points. So how can we actually assign them to any place in our energy body? And most common actually assignment is to see Ketu as literally the descending power and Rahu as ascending power. Rahu as the power that makes us progress up, Ketu as the power who makes us go more in the body, right? Rahu makes us go more in the head, Ketu makes us go more in the body. But Sri Yukteswar for himself, he was also seeing Rahu and Ketu also as seated on opposite places in our physical body. He saw Ketu as seated in our root chakra because Ketu is so strongly connected to Ganesha as well, who is presiding deity of root chakra. And Rahu obviously seated in our head, right in our head itself, because he does represent the head and also he can make us overthink things a lot sometimes. So of course, whenever we want to balance them out, we would go and do something opposite to them. So when we want to balance Rahu and his mental energy, sometimes using another mental tool, which is like mantra or meditation, can be a little tricky because the mind will still lose focus. But when we bring the focus outside through some form of physical exercise or even involving ourselves in some physical seva, literally service, any form of practice that makes us forget about ourselves and our problems for a moment, that can be in many ways more helpful as well. Now, since Rahu, Ketu, and Saturn, and also Mars, they are grahas that are essentially considered to be tamasic. Even Rahu and Ketu are called Chaya grahas. They belong to the shadow. They show our shadow tendencies. Of course, since they are tamasic in nature, they will be all also somehow connected with our root chakra as well. Because in our energy body, the three gunas, they also reside. In our root chakra resides Tamoguna, where is the Brahma Granthi. In our heart chakra resides Rajoguna, where is Vishnu Granthi. And then in between our eyebrows, in our third eye chakra resides Sattva Guna, where is the Rudra Granthi. And the thing is that if we think about all those four tamasic planets, Mars, Saturn, Rahu, and Ketu, they all teach us some lessons related also to our root chakra. Rahu in particular, he can sometimes distort our sense of reality very much because our root chakra is all about it, how we relate to reality around us. And how Rahu distorts our perception of reality is either by many of its various ego defense mechanisms, projections, manipulations, deceptions, etc. Most of these things we don't even realize actually on a daily basis. Or sometimes for something as simple as fear, doubt, and worry, in fact. And this I find actually so fascinating that Rahu, he is of course also giver of fear. He is giver of this confusion and worry and doubt. But he doesn't even technically exist on the sky, right? It's such a fascinating thing to really consider because even scientists agree that like 90% of troubles and worries and all of that we so anxiously think about that may potentially happen in the future, 90% of that never happens, actually. And this is also why I believe in periods like that when we are dominated by Rahu, it's very healthy in periods like that to question our mind, do the introspection and don't just take for granted whatever the mind says. Don't just believe everything the mind says because mind is good in deceiving us. I think that one thing that we should remind ourselves always is that Rahu knows us all and all our weaknesses much better than we know ourselves. And he's very good in also exploiting them. So also doing, of course, sincere introspection can be very, very helpful here as well. And of course, since goddess who actually helps us to transcend this tamoguna, this delusion, and who resides in our root chakra, is goddess Mahakali, also contemplating upon her and meditating upon her can be greatly helpful. This is something that is also quite interesting because it's mentioned by sage Parashara as well in Brihat Parashara Horashastra, that again, if you want to overcome any difficulty that is coming into our life because of the influence of Rahu, once again, meditating on Devi Mahatmya can be very helpful. And I would say that especially meditating on the first chapter of the Devi Mahatmya can be the most helpful, because it's dedicated to Mahakali. To think about it, it's quite an interesting beginning of the whole story, because in the first chapter, we basically speaking have a meeting of a great king, King Surata. Surata means the one having great chariot, like a metaphor of having very healthy and strong body, right? And he meets merchant Samadhi. Samadhi means a very focused mind, right? So they meet each other and they share their misery, basically speaking, because both of them lost everything and they don't understand why. And not only that, the king lost his kingdom, his wife, his sons, his ministers, everyone turned against him. And same happens to the merchant, even though on much smaller scale. And they talk to each other and they discover like, wow, like all these people, my own family, they turned against me. And yet in my mind, I still keep worrying about them. Like what a great delusion it must be. What causes this attachment in my mind? What makes me so blinded by affection? What makes me so blinded by my attachments to them? How I do not see this reality in front of me? So they realize that, they are wise enough to realize it, and yet they cannot free themselves from it. So they actually go and meet the great sage, Medas. Meda means like the higher intellect, so it's also quite a symbolic name here. And this sage, he tells them, look, this whole world is deluded by Maya, by Mahamaya. Only she herself can free you, but she can also bind you. When you approach her, where you pray to her, she can help you. But she also, through those experiences, is reminding us that our human limited power is limited in nature, that we need to approach some higher force for help sometimes. And I think especially when it comes to Rahu and Ketu, it's very important to realize that, in fact. And Goddess Mahakali is really so beautiful to meditate upon, because even if you look at her form, in one of her hands, she's literally holding a severed head. She's having Rahu under control. In many temples, in fact, in South India, we'll see that Rahu and Ketu are on the entrance to the temple of the goddess. We have one beautiful temple here in Mauritius where there are like live statues of Rahu and Ketu on both sides of the temple of Goddess Kali, almost as her guardians, as her devotees. So Goddess Mahakali helps us to like remove this chattering mind and enter this deeper, calmer state of being. This is why she's usually dressed like she's naked, right? And she's completely dark, black, but she also represents this most pristine and innocent, you could say, state of our consciousness, where there's nothing that needs to be hidden anymore. Because if we think of black color, every other color that you add to black also becomes black. So Goddess Kali, through that, also reminds us that we too can enter this deeper state of peace within ourselves, where the mind is completely still and peaceful, and when this chattering head in her hand is under control as well. And for me, it was a very fascinating thing. I read a couple of years ago, actually, that many years ago, when soldiers in some country would go to a war, what would happen? Of course, very often people who go to a war who are in so incredibly stressful conditions, they are very sleep deprived. They actually can't sleep. So they were advised to do this very simple exercise that was supposed to put them to sleep in a matter of like minutes, 2 minutes, literally. And I tried it and it works. And it's actually so simple and so profoundly spiritual, I would say, because the exercise is basically speaking, when you go to sleep, you can even do it while laying down. And of course, there are these thoughts that appear. These can be images, these can be all audio thoughts, right? Like different types of thoughts passing by. And the exercise is simple. You just fade them all to black. Just look into the darkness in front of your closed eyes, and whatever disturbing thought appears in front of you, comes to you, just see it slowly fading to black and becoming black. And a person can fall asleep instantly. And it's actually really working amazingly. So this is also something that I believe is a very healthy habit for anyone who goes through this more disturbed time period, which is usually caused by Rahu, to practice frequently, to learn how to like fade things to black and just really silence this chatter of the mind. Because when the mind keeps going with his inner dialogue, of course, he can disturb us a lot. But the moment we notice that, we can just fade it slowly and offer it to her if we want as well. So this is something that can be very, very beautiful. Also for people who have maybe trouble meditating or don't have experience with meditation. I also have one little meditation. It's like, I think 20 minutes or so. It's not so long. And it's basically speaking that form of meditation that I described just now, just breathing, mantra in your mind, and just fading things to black. And it can really help a lot when a person is like struggling with this constant thought appearing left and right. So apart from those things that I already mentioned, of course, contemplating on Goddess Mahakali and contemplating on Devi Mahatmya can help a lot, because Rahu himself is, we could almost say, her force, right? Actually, that's what Rahu also represents. Goddess also is present within us as Kundalini Shakti, as the force who can bind us or liberate us. And same as with the Rahu. So if we meditate on the Divine Mother as Durga or as Kali in any of these more powerful aspects, she can be very helpful to us. I usually recommend a little bit more whenever Rahu is particularly strong through Mahadasha or through transit, and if his energy feels overwhelming, to rather pray to Goddess Mahakali, because she helps us to get our peace of mind once again. And that's very helpful. So one simple mantra that one can use is Om Krim Mahakalikaye Namaha, because it helps to transcend this tamoguna that Rahu is inducing in us. Also, Rahu is known as being the karaka or significator of all type of yantras or machines, some external tools also of worship. Therefore, meditating with Sri Yantra also, or painting Sri Yantra, can be very, very helpful as well. Because Sri Yantra is seen basically as this greatest geometric manifestation of Divine Mother herself. And truly, when we meditate upon it or paint it, or even just gaze at its very center, something changes in our consciousness. We just become more aware that it's all a part of a bigger whole, a bigger plan for our life. And that in itself can be very helpful. But in any case, for whoever tries to meditate in a period when the thoughts are very disturbed because of Rahu, I would always suggest to get into some more external form of connection with the divine, be it through yoga, through reading maybe Devi Mahatmya, meditating on Sri Yantra, because sometimes just sitting straight and closing your eyes is just not enough, because the mind will keep thinking. So the mind needs a little better tools, I would say, when we are about to heal Rahu within us as well. And as the last thing for me, there's one amazing shloka which I really love so much from Devi Mahatmya. So in Devi Mahatmya, in the chapter, the 5th chapter, there's this beautiful prayer to Divine Mother known as Devi Stuti, which is very, very beautiful. And I would definitely suggest to anyone to just know about it, even if not learn it, because it's a very beautiful. Basically speaking, this prayer praises the goddess or Divine Mother as the one who dwells in all beings in the form of, I would say, our most vital human experiences that we always experience. So there are these 18 forms that are listed there. Each verse of this prayer starts with Ya Devi Sarva Bhuteshu, O you goddess who dwell in all beings, and then ends with Namastasye, 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 Namo Namaha. Praise be to you, praise be to you, praise be to you. So basically speaking, goddess is praised as dwelling in us, as in the form of hunger, for example, in the form of thirst, which are the things that Rahu is also inducing within us. So she's praised as the one who dwells in the form of kshuddha, hunger. But at the same time, she is praised as the one who dwells in us in the form of tushti, or satisfaction. And the very first verse of that prayer praises her as the one who dwells in us in the form of buddhi, or intellect, higher knowledge. And then the very last verse of the same prayers praises her as the one who dwells in all of us, also in the form of confusion. The prayer says, Ya Devi Sarvam Bhuteshu Bhranti Rupena Samstita Namastasye, 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 Namo Namaha. O goddess who abides in all beings in the form of confusion, salutations to her, salutations to her, salutations to her, again and again. It's something that definitely confuses our mind, right? Like why we would even praise the goddess in this form. But I think that prayers like that are very helpful to remind us that everything that we experience, because things and experiences that we receive from Rahu, they can make us really question things. They can make us question the sense of everything we get to experience, really. They can make us feel very confused. And in times like that, it's really important, I would say, to remind ourselves that behind all of that, even behind the most strange, the most unexplainable experience, there is the hand of God. And there is a purpose behind it. And we might not always understand it immediately, because the nodes are acting in a very mysterious ways, but there always will be something very important for us to learn from that experience itself, even if in due time. So that's all from me, Dr. Paiji. I know I took a lot of time, sorry.
No, I think Achalaji, it was so wonderfully, put together. I was so, engrossed in this whole discussion. And I love the way that you bring things up. Like even this shloka that you have presented here, Yadhevi Sarvabhuteshu Bhranti Rupena Samstita Namastaste 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 Namo Namah. Now, Bhranti, the word Bhranti in Sanskrit also means false opinion or even wandering, unwanted wandering, which is you have no clue where you are going. So Rahu usually gives you, if you see Rahu's time periods that come in the dashas or antardashas, it makes you wander like, you do not have a direction.
Yes.
And one more interesting thing that came to my mind as you were speaking is, first of all, we have to know the origin of Rahu. Rahu's father's name is Viprachitti, and he was the king of the Danavas. His mother is Danu. And Rahu's mother, her name is Simhika. In certain texts, they say she is the sister of Hiranyakashipu. Some text I've also seen, they say she's the sister of Prahlada. Now, whatever is it, mostly it is considered she is Hiranyakashipu's sister.
Yes.
But Hiranyakashipu and Simhika are Diti's son and daughter, which means they are Daityas. So, Swarbhanu or Swabhanu, whatever we say, he is the name of his paternal and maternal grandfather, because paternal and maternal grandfather are the same. Because Kashyapa Rishi is both his paternal grandfather and maternal grandfather. Because Danu and Diti both are wives of Kashyapa Rishi.
Yes.
So Swa Bhanu, which means somebody who can self-illuminate himself, or Swar Bhanu. So you can see this connection that he has, that he is self-illumined. And he is the first cross breed that has happened between two species. One is coming from Danu and coming from Daityas and Danavas. He is the first offspring who has come as a crossbreed between two first cousins.
Yeah, it's very interesting.
Do you understand? So what is he trying to do? He is trying to create optical illusions. Because he has both. Simhika means what some people also consider Simhika as Holika. Who was, who tried to burn Prahlada and she got burnt herself.
Yeah.
But there is another tradition which also talks about Simhika again. Now we do not know as per tradition if it is the same Simhika which is Rahu's mother or no. But very interesting to note, in Ramayana, when Hanumanji was taking his flight towards Lanka, he leapt towards Lanka. He met so many, obstacles, demons. In that, one of them is Simhika. And what was her strength? She was blessed to catch the shadow of anything which was.
Yes, yes.
So it is very interesting. Shadow, the word shadow is because they are called as Chaya Grahas as well, shadow. So something they had the ability to control people's shadow. Even if you see Shani Shani Dev also being born from shadow. His mother is shadow.
Yes.
So this is quite interesting that when you see catching of the shadow and Simhika and how Hanumanji, killed Simhika. That is what the story is. Now, one more thing when you were talking about, which came to my mind, is you talked about Mahamaya. Now, very interestingly, you will see Krishna's birth. Krishna's birth and the prophecy which came when Krishna was already transported after his birth, and Kamsa comes and he takes the baby girl, he tries to fling her and crush her head with the wall, but she flies from his hand and she becomes a Akashwani. Akashwani means she becomes a prophecy. And she is none other than, they say it is Mahamaya, which is some traditions she's also called as Vishnu Durga. Now, interestingly, she has come to protect the 8th child of Devaki and Vasudeva, and it is also that the child was born on the same day when we consider Durga was also born, Ashtami.
Ashtami, yes.
So if we see there is a connection with Ashtami, Krishna being born as the 8th child, the 8th incarnation, and also on Ashtami, which is connected to not only Durga, it is also connected to Kala Bhairava.
And also Rahu. In many traditions, Ashtami is also ruled by Rahu.
Ashtami, Tithi, if you look at the Tithi, it is ruled by Rahu.
Yes.
So
it's fascinating, that you're mentioning that, Dr. Paiji, because I personally feel that for whoever would like to really see from a scriptural perspective, how Rahu works upon our mind, I would say the best thing to do is to read about Kamsa, actually how he behaved when he heard that prophecy, right? He could not sleep properly. He got completely mad, actually. He was seeing Krishna and his own death, and he drinks like water and it turns into blood in his mind. He's seeing, like, basically speaking, assassins everywhere. He becomes paranoid, literally. And what for? Just because of one prophecy, right? That came. That's actually how huge fear Rahu can induce in us sometimes.
And that is the fear usually Rahu can give you during the times when you have done something wrong, And you
Yes.
these kind of illusions when when we were younger, sometimes some people when you're a very very young kid, and you're becoming very very naughty, what do you do? Say, be careful, otherwise there is going to be a ghost. So we instill these kind of fears in
Yes.
as well. There is a ghost
Yeah.
from, these people will come and they will punish you and all of that. What is this? We are already creating these thoughts. The seeds of Rahu is already being sown, and we are trying to use Rahu to control a situation.
Yes. That's actually so true that you're saying that, Dr. Paiji, because I believe that on this that happens on external level, we actually, or rather our mind, our own ego, is also doing to us actually. Because like also like this Kamsa inside, right? Who is so like paranoid and scared, we can see him also as a metaphor of our own ego. Like this is like actually so common when a person just starts to walk on spiritual path, does more spiritual practice, mantra, meditation, whatever the person is doing. Suddenly, there's so many obstacles, the life goes upside down, and you're thinking like, why is that so? It's actually just the ego, like literally freaking out. It's like, oh my God, my death is coming. Like Kamsa kept repeating, my angel of death is coming. It's somewhere there. I can't see him, but I can't find him, but I know he is there. I know that my end is inevitable, actually. And this inevitability and this tendency, oh, let me try to find it. I send this demon, that demon, that demon. I see personally those demons as just like these countless strategies that our mind is using to keep us away from what is real and true and divine inside of us. The Krishna, right? Consciousness. But literally all these demons are like all these interesting like strategies that the ego is using. Let me use this or that strategy. And Rahu is so clever. This is something that I always like to say and reiterate to everyone, because even if we read Devi Mahatmya, the second to fourth chapter, when the goddess is fighting Mahishasura, who represents this ego within us, what is interesting about this demon is that he's a shapeshifter. You kill him in one form, he assumes another. And I think it's exactly what our own ego is doing when it defends itself. We kill, like, let's say it on the surface or just some one aspect of that quality, it just becomes more subtle. It changes the strategy, but it will still be there. And I think we can see it the most in people, for example, who go through like severe depression or severe, let's say, low self-esteem, like these people who believe, oh, I am really the worst, etc. Many people went through that phase, and my personal theory about it is that it's actually nothing else than ego, because when ego cannot be the best, it wants to be the worst, just so it's still special and unique, right? In a way. I know it's extremely harsh to say, but Rahu is really excellent in playing on our emotions and on emotions of other people as well. And I think we need to be very, very careful about that as well when in these periods.
Yeah. That, what you're saying, it just reminds me of another story from Buddhism. I don't know whether you have heard this story. This story is about Gautam Buddha was passing through a forest which was known to have some of the deadliest dacoits. But people warned him, see, it is almost nightfall. I think we should not enter the forest. To Gautam Buddha, his disciples tell, because there is known to be a ferocious dacoit and a thief. What he does, he not only steals your belongings that are there, but he also cuts your thumb. And he has already got, Angulimal. His name was
Angulimala, yeah.
So he used to make a garland of these thumbs and he used to wear it, right? So the story, see, Rahu, in my view, is connected to all kinds of thieves who live in the forest, and dacoits and outlaws, and also Robin Hoods sometimes. Robin Hoods who steal the rich to give it to the poor. That is also Rahu. Now, this Angulimal, when, this whole episode, you have to know that Angulimal, after meeting Gautam Buddha and his discussion with Gautam Buddha, he becomes a devotee. Now, this is exactly how a Rahu will behave when he comes with a very strong, exalted Mercury. That's why Rahu feels very comfortable in Mercury signs.
This is actually so beautiful that you're saying.
Gautam Buddha is like a Mercury, right? Very exalted Mercury. And somebody who's enlightened, master. When people who are, who are what we call as outcast, out of the box thinkers, these are very much of a catalyst. We need them in today's times because they can bring some changes which is very traditional. Because Rahu will try to break through the rules, break through the traditions, and bring something which is unconventional. So that's why I call them the catalyst. Because in every organization, if you do not have a catalyst, what will happen? We will be, our business will run as it has to run, as per the the revenue projections given by the, but we will not do something which is out of the box and really path breaking research and bring something that humanity will say, wow, this is like, has really transformed, like the iPhones of the world. They, if you look at Apple only has about 4 products. Literally think about it. They have only 4 products. If you really see from that 4 products, they are really making 4 or 3 products, I don't know. At the max they might have 5 products, but I'm just saying, it's not that they have 100 products. With limited products, they have really exploded the market. It doesn't mean that there have not been mobile phones in the market, cell phones in the market, or but they have revolutionized. That is Rahu. Revolutionize and coming with something that people would all say, I want this, I want this. So this is what Rahu can do for you when it is obsessed and it wants to really create a brand around it. Which means today I don't own an iPhone, but I see everybody around me has an iPhone. Can you imagine the impact that the brand is making? So, which means for me, brand doesn't matter, but for many people, it's an identity. And who creates?
Because Rahu is the image, right? The appearance.
Appearance. It doesn't have a body, but just by having, people cannot eat food, but people would definitely go and buy the next version of iPhone that is being launched. Can you imagine? That is adoption, technology adoption.
Yeah.
Creates that illusion that if I do not own this, I am outcast. Many people consider my family because I don't have an iPhone.
Yeah, there's always like this fear of missing out on something, fear of being left behind, fear of not having like what is there, and this is actually so beautiful, Dr. Paij, that you brought the story of Angulimala, and I think it's so accurate, in this connection also with Mercury, because if we think about it, like what is actually amazing in this story, the reason why Angulimala like decided that like abandoned, let's say, his Rahu life, right, and became a devotee of Buddha, is because actually when he went and he tried to rob Buddha and take his finger, Buddha just gave him his finger and said, "Here, take my toe. I don't care. I want this body. Take it. Be happy." Without a trace of fear. And I think that this is like something that really disarms Rahu, like just don't react to it. Don't react to whatever the mind is doing. This is actually the true buddhi, right? The true like intellect, the highest form of Mercury, we could say, is that he's neutral. That's why he can also easily neutralize Rahu, because he actually really gives us this ability to stay neutral. And this is actually something so simple, like in theory, of course, not maybe as easy to practice, but it's so simple. It's what Krishna even says like over and over and over again in Bhagavad Gita. Just stay neutral whenever there are these high ups and high lows. Just stay neutral, meet them and experience them, but realize that, hey, these are the gunas acting. This is the Mahamaya acting. Actually, it's not you. Experience that. It's for you to experience, but that's all. You don't need to be entangled in that. There's no need.
And that's why I feel Rahu is, you cannot win over Rahu by using Jupiter's charm. Jupiter wants to quote Shastras. Imagine Angulimal if Buddha would start, telling about, this Shastra says this is wrong, you should not be doing, he would have definitely, taken offense. But only a mercurial person can really win over a Rahu, not a Jupiterian person. That's why there is Guru Chandal Yoga. That means not like a guru trying to tell him from the text and from the scriptures and from the tradition, this is what you're doing and how you're living is completely wrong. You will go to hell. You will go. He doesn't care. He says, let me go to hell, but I will do my. But a mercurial person who has Mercury very strong, like Gautam Buddha, could win over him and make him transform.
Absolutely.
So
there was actually a story, Dr. Paiji. I don't remember. I really don't remember the name of the saint, but it was a very recent saint that is kind of similar story. I really don't remember the name. I think it was a saint that was maybe definitely not alive anymore, but there was a famous like saint and sadhu, and he didn't really like pet disciples or anything, but he was known to very, very well. He was living in a very humble conditions. He didn't have any of his belongings at all. He just had his begging bowl, that's all. But he was very dear to the queen, and queen actually just she literally begged him, one day, please don't use this begging bowl. I give you the golden bowl. Can you please use that one? And actually he was so, let's say, enlightened soul. He knows he doesn't have any attachment to it. And he was like, okay, if it makes her happy, I don't care. He was like completely neutral to it. So he took this golden bowl and just went, and he just continues his practice as if nothing happened. But when he took this bowl, there was actually a thief that noticed that again, that the bowl is there. And he was like, oh my goodness, this guy, he completely doesn't realize the value of this object. Let me steal it from him. I can have some use of it, actually. But of course, the saint was aware that the thief is there. So when thief was somewhere there at the back, and he was thinking how to attack the saint, how to this bowl, what the saint did, he just threw the bowl away. And this thief, he was so shocked by what happened. He was like, how can he even do that? That he just could not control himself. It was stronger than him. He actually approached the saint and said, why did you do that? Like, why are you throwing this bowl? Don't you know the value of this object? And then they had this long spiritual discussion. It's actually a real story also. So they had this long spiritual discussion, and thief was very impressed by the saint, but he said, your teachings are very beautiful, and I would like to practice them, but I'm afraid it's too difficult for me. I'm a thief. I have some scars. I don't think it will be very easy. But the saint told him, but I don't ask you to stop stealing. And the thief was like, oh, wow, you really don't ask me to stop stealing. That's surprising. Okay. So tell me, I want to become your disciple. Tell me what to do. And the saint said to him, next time, when you are about to steal something, I just ask you about one thing. Please just start observing your breath. That's all. Nothing else. And the thief said, okay, that's very easy. I can totally do that. So the thief bowed down to a saint, took him as his guru to his cart, and he went away living his life. But then after a few months, the same thief came to the saint, and he said to the saint, you tricked me, because each time I tried to steal, I would focus on my breath and I can't steal anymore. You actually tricked me. I can't do this anymore because it's just not possible. When I am focused fully on my breath, my mind becomes so neutral, so untouched by all these desires inside, that I just can't do this anymore. So he said to me, you tricked me. And I think that this is also, like, this is something so beautiful about this saint, about Gautam Buddha as well, is that the true guru is always like teaching through the real experience, right? Not like you say, Dr. Paiji, through the scripture quoting. Of course, Rahu will not connect with that at all. But through his own real experience, Rahu is really wowed, right? And that's an amazing thing.
This thing about desire, you said, and many people, we do this, but we forget why we're doing this. About desire. Now, in the natural zodiac, if you see, Kumbha Rashi, which is Aquarius, the natural 11th house, is all about our desires because it's a natural.
Yes.
But
because it is this pot, right? Without almost without a limit. Yeah.
and we know that this Kumbha Rashi is co-lorded with Shani and Rahu. Rahu also co-lords Kumbha. What we do when we have to do any fire ritual, we first invoke everything into this Kumbha. And what is there in the Kumbha? You know what we keep? We keep a coconut, we keep mango leaves. If you see, all of that is connected to Kumbha because coconut is a representation of Rahu. The kumbha is the pot which has the still water, which we know. Finally, what we do, we take the mango leaves and we sprinkle the water onto the person to purify and to sanctify, so that whatever their wishes are has to be also. So we see a lot of connection with kumbha when we're doing kumbhabhishekam. So if your desires are not being fulfilled, then do one kumbhabhishekam, abhishekam of any deity with the kumbha, water kept in the pot with all of that, and then finally they remove and they do the abhishekam. So this is fulfillment of your desires, that you want a desire, that something you are seeing, but we are trying to hold that desire. We are invoking the deities and we are chanting mantras onto that water. The water is then purified, sanctified, and with the mango leaves. Look, if you see mango leaves, if you understand nakshatras, Purva Bhadrapada,
Purvabhadrapada. Yeah.
mango leaves. So that is, you can see 3/4 of Purva Bhadrapada falls in Kumbha Rashi.
Yes.
So the things we are doing is we are invoking the energies of Kumbha. And
Yeah. So there's Purvabhadrapada above and Shatabisha below, which is the water, Varuna, right? Yeah.
Varuna. The water is there, which is Varuna. So it is beautifully that without our knowledge we're doing all of this, but we do not know why we are doing it.
Yes, indeed.
But anyway, but I think this is something that even the coconut we keep on the thing with the mango leaves, everything has a significance that we do.
Yes.
Well, okay, Achalaji, this has been very, very wonderful. We can go on for longer than this, I know.
Yeah.
I wanted to share so that we can then wrap up today's discussion. I know I wish that this discussion doesn't end. Hope we had more people joining in the discussion so that we can also learn from all of us. But this was fantastic, and we enjoyed this whole session today that you have brought us.
Thank you so much. I also enjoyed, and it's always a pleasure to talk to you, Dr. Paiji, and share ideas. This is when the good side of Rahu comes through, right? The hunger for knowledge. Yeah.
So much as the sattvic side of Rahu that you talked about, where there is growth, there is evolution, there is even the civilization and the advancement that has happened over the centuries is also Rahu. Okay, now one more thing I also wanted to add. I don't know how many of you will connect with this idea. See, Rahu is connected to the wheel, the chakra. Okay, and that is what we say. The invention of the wheel started the industrial revolution, which means because it started with transportation when the wheels were invented, and then you see even rubber. If you say today's tires, everything is made of rubber. Rubber is also very strongly Rahu, black in colors. Look, today we are also connected to Rahu. I'm wearing a black, you're wearing a dark blue. Rahu's energy is very much packed today in our discussion. But so initially, therefore, Rahu took over this innovation and this invention, because Rahu is connected to all kinds of research, innovation, and discoveries. So this name was given to the first innovator or the inventor, which was later taken on the concept and was taken forward by Rahu. But do you know who was the first person who invented the wheel in the Vedic tradition?
No idea.
He was none other than Indra. That's why his name was Shakra or Chakra.
Oh, wow. That's fascinating.
Because Indra's innovation, later on, it was adopted by Rahu and he brought it to the earth. And
Mm.
because of Rahu's innovation, we see a lot of industrial revolution. And what we are seeing today, if you see after the innovation of transportation, now we see trains. We had steam engines coming in. After that, we had aeroplanes coming in. Today we have jets, supersonic, everything are. But see, Rahu has good things, but Rahu also brings in the ballistic missiles, the poisonous gases. All of this also are Rahu.
Yeah, Rahu is both like I like to think about it that he can be either the sustainable progress or unsustainable progress, and that's why sadly in current times in which we are living there is so much of unsustainable progress, right? We are like truly living in the Kali Yuga where we are so much in our minds that we keep destroying our own environment literally. I was reading, well, maybe a little bit of a bad joke, like a few days ago, but it was like saying that in the joke there are basically speaking some extraterrestrial let's say life species. They are passing through Earth, and they are trying to determine are there any intelligent species living here on our planet, and then they are saying to one another, oh look, they're trying to go to Mars while destroying their own planet. These are not intelligent. So,
That's very surprising what you said, because a couple of days ago, Dr. Aditya Togi has been sending me some links to certain uh, unidentified flying objects that have been seen by many people in US, especially from the Pacific Ocean, and they are seeing this huge kind of activity. It's not by one air pilot, but there have been by many pilots, and this is between August and September of this year.
oh
We
wow.
have seen a lot of activity. You can probably go and check online. And surprisingly, they have all seen this in the direction of the Big Dipper, which is Arsha Major, Saptarishis Mandala. There is a lot of
Mm.
activity and fast moving objects that they have been noticing, and that many pilots have been seeing. So this kind of maybe adds to your joke, because all of these things which are unidentified flying objects, everything, these are not from what we can prove. And many of the pilots have also contacted the FBI to find out if there has been any secret. Sometimes there are missions by the military and the army and the aircrafts testing some of their own innovations, and but we do not know. Reports have yet to come from the Pentagon, but yeah, interesting themes that you can see coming out. But definitely I feel there is something very, very Rahu with in between these eclipses as well that we have.
Absolutely.
So, but Achalaji, wonderful. Thank you very much for taking your time and coming and sharing these nuggets of information. I'm sure our viewers will enjoy this discussion, and we would, like to see you more coming and sharing such. It's very simple, and also remember, as I want to just close it by saying, Rahu is not impressed by knowledge or wisdom.
Mm.
Rahu is impressed by common sense, which is very uncommon today.
Absolutely. Yes. I totally agree.
So
Yeah.
you can
Because common sense is actual, I would say, this is the actual opposite of Rahu. It's not wisdom, because it's like really common sense, right? Like this, because common sense comes, I think, only out of a person who is truly grounded, right? Rahu actually struggles with that.
yes,
Rahu can be really ungrounded sometimes. But when we have common sense, we are grounded. We just see reality the way it is, and Rahu just cannot deny it. He cannot deny the fact. He must agree to that. There's no other option. Which is why I personally believe that eclipses are actually so fascinating time actually to like review also our own maybe priorities, our own delusions that we have in our mind, because we get this extra connection, then extra alignment inside of us. So also for me, I was thinking like, wow, this is really, really amazing time to talk about Rahu. So let's do that. I'm also actually doing starting this Sunday like a very, very tiny short workshop on eclipses as well, because I thought it's really time, you know, for something like that. It's like actually it's amazing, and this is what you said, Dr. Paiji, is really clicks, yeah, like common sense. It truly speaks to him. Absolutely, I can agree to that fully.
Okay, Achalaji, thank you very much. Wonderful to see you, and we'll keep seeing
Thank you.
this channel. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Paiji.